Hello and welcome to the Tennis Podcast and our review of 2025, our opportunity to look back and relive the highs and lows of the year that was, with the help of some of our favourite, most beloved, most esteemed contributors and some very familiar voices to regular listeners of the Tennis Podcast. There is none more familiar, though, than that of David Law. David, how are you feeling about reliving 2025?
Feel pretty good about it. Yeah, I'm familiar because you can't get rid of me and I'm old. But yes, I'm quite looking forward to reliving 2025 because I've mostly enjoyed it. My kids have this word that they use to describe things that they don't think are that great but aren't terrible, which is mid. Well, I don't think this was a mid year. I think it was better than that, but it wasn't perfect. So could do better.
When was the last mid year? Matt.
Oh.
Hello. That wasn't. I wasn't intending for that to be my Matt introduction. But it just came to me. We're going with the flow, Matt. When was the last mid-year in tennis?
Bloody hell, what a tough opening question. Well, let's think about this as logically as we can. 2020 was bad. That was worse than mid. Was 2021 mid as we sort of came back? I don't know, maybe that was bad as well. I don't know. But no, we had things like Amanda Anisimova.
We had the Calendar Slam Quest in 21.
Yeah, I think that was maybe a good year.
22? Bit mid?
22, I mean...
Miracle in Melbourne, David.
Miracle in Melbourne, Barty. But then Barty retired.
Ash Barty.
Okay, mid doesn't exist in tennis, kids. Sorry.
Was 2023 any good?
Carlos Alcaraz emerged.
Yep.
Yeah. 2023 was quite good, wasn't it? It had that men's Wimbledon final.
We had some great, Sabalenka-Swiatek moments, I think, that year.
That was the emergence of their rivalry. Okay, well, 2025 has certainly sort of reached par, which is apparently great. Matt, how are you doing? The original intro that I intended for you.
Very well, thank you. Yeah, I'm actually wearing my Australian Open hoodie, just for anyone watching on YouTube, just show you the mindset I'm already in, thinking about next year, but still ready to look back on this year. And we've done that in a kind of fun alternative way for friends this week already with the Barge Awards, and then we had a quiz for some friends last night as well. And this is going to be a bit more of a serious look back, I think, but I'm sure, I hope, with some fun along the way.
Are you saying, Matt, that David mistaking the Pope for Matteo Berrettini wasn't a serious look back on 2025?
Late contender for my highlight of the entire year. That, what a gift David gave us with that answer. Just the best.
About every 10 minutes, my brain reminds me that happens, and I have a little chuckle. That happened, and I have a little chuckle to myself. That happened about 14 hours ago during the Tennis Podcast annual quiz of the year, which is one of my favourite nights of the year. I understand why it might not be one of yours, David. The format is that Matt and I write the quiz and host the quiz, and David has to take the quiz. He's a very good sport about it. But last night he did guess that the outline of the Pope was in fact Matteo Berrettini during the picture round.
Never been seen in the same room, have they? So, I mean, maybe they have.
I think actually they might have been seen in the same room during that actual photo shoot. I think Berrettini might have been there, but just wasn't the.
Well, you can see my thinking in question. Can't you? Yeah, it was Jannik Sinner stood next to the Davis Cup trophy, and Who Am I was the other one. And it was just an outline, and I mean, I went through the plausible options. A short map,
very clearly wearing a sort of robe. But anyway, It was an absolutely incredible moment, David. You were a great sport. The quiz actually started with a webinar disaster, but we're not talking about that. It then moved on to David having to stand up and display his lower half in order to prove he was wearing trousers. It was a great night, and David, you performed very respectably.
Yeah, aside from these moments, I got just above half marks, I think. So I was quite pleased, including 5 out of 5 in the Who Beats Zverev section.
It's a tough quiz. We have to pitch it quite hard because we know there are people taking that quiz. Some of our friends of the pod that have been with us a long time and know their tennis. They put the three of us in the shade with their tennis knowledge, not just their knowledge, but their ability to recollect that knowledge. Because so often you see people in the quiz that are like, "Oh God, I know that." You just can't bring it to the forefront of your mind quite in time. But my goodness me. It will surprise no one that there are some real tennis nerds that listen to the tennis podcast. So if you would like to be one of those tennis nerds officially and take on David and Pam Shriver, Pam was a fantastic sport as well in the quiz last night, then the way to do that is to become a friend of the tennis podcast and snap up one of our very exciting spots. You can take us on at daily predictions during a Grand Slam. You can have your pet as a mascot of the show. And devastating news as of right now is that one presenter mascot slot is still available. So this is a come and get me plea to not leave one of us on the shelf, please. Because, I mean, that would just be terrible. So if you're considering snapping up a presenter mascot slot, I implore you to act quickly and put us out of our misery. You can also guest edit a Q&A show, and you can also just become a friend of the tennis podcast. All subscribers get access to at least 25 new exclusive podcasts every year, plus Hannah's column, plus access to the Barge, our community chat platform for people that just want to talk about tennis and make connections in a non-toxic environment. And you also get a listening experience with far, far fewer ads as well. All friend subscriptions can be given as gifts if you're stuck about what to get someone this holiday season. I am stuck on a number of gifts, but I don't think, gift a subscription to my own podcast to get me out of those holes, because that would be weird and smug. But it won't be weird and smug for you. So something to consider. Just go to tennis.supportingcast.fm and take your pick from all the various categories that we have on offer. We will also, of course, put that link in the show notes. And just so you know, 4 of those 25 minimum bonus podcasts that we offer every year to Friends subscribers, 4 of those are Grand Slam review shows that we record in the immediate aftermath of every Grand Slam with the help of voice notes from our favourite contributors. So basically, those shows follow a very similar format to the show that you're about to hear, but they reflect on the Grand Slam that has just been rather than the whole year. And they are some of our very favourite shows, David.
Yeah, no, they are, because especially when we get out of a Grand Slam, I mean, we've used all of our takes up, and also I can't really process the event that well, and then suddenly we've got half a dozen people we really like and respect who've got a different way of looking at it, and they send them through to us, and they always just open the floodgates for further thoughts and ideas and reflections. I'm not sure that as a tagline, become a friend of the tennis podcast, it's not weird and smug, is going to take off, but we can try.
No, that was gift the tennis podcast. Oh. It's not a weird and smug thing to do unless you're one of us.
True, that's fair.
We are going to kick off this 2025 review show on the most explosive possible note. We have trailed that we have a pretty incredible piece of content for this show, and we don't want to make you wait for it any longer. We always ask Pam Shriver and Mary Carillo for voice notes following every Grand Slam for our year review shows, and they are always so generous with their time and energy, and have up until now always been forthcoming, and they've always been dynamite. However, what we haven't had before is a combined Pam Shriver, Mary Carillo voice note. Well, that drought ends now, folks, because that is exactly what you're about to hear. Pam and Mary together, looking back on 2025. Enjoy.
From Naples, Florida, I am on this amazing Friends tour. I had 5 days that I needed to decide what to do with, and I'm in order. I've seen Martina Navratilova, Chris Evert, Alexander Stevenson, and then Mary Carillo allowed me to stay in her beautiful cottage.
Yeah, with special guest star Monica Seles. We hadn't planned to see Monica, and we saw her yesterday. It was very nice. Yeah, Pam, you have a lot of friends.
I do have a lot of friends. That's what tennis gives you, right? And so I literally, I don't do this very often. My kids are older now. I'm like, why not take 5 days? So I got the biggest rent-a-car I could find. Didn't park it very well.
Disgusting. It's disgusting. Ugh.
But what about we do a little reflection on the tennis year that is finally ended?
Are we sure it's over? There's probably some... Okay, here's my idea, okay? For the tennis calendar, if I got to fix it forever, I would have a big break, at least a couple of weeks after Wimbledon. So you play your hard courts, then you play your clay courts, then you play your grass courts, and then you're exhausted, and you have part of the summer off, and then you sweep into the U.S. Open. How do you like that idea?
Well, I think the U.S. Open, now that it's a 3-week major and they want to keep Labor Day as a middle weekend, I think it could start a week later and you'd still have Labor Day weekend a major part of the U.S. Open.
I just think so many people are injured by the summertime. So the idea that you can end the season early and then have some time, like why don't you take a big break in the middle of the season? Does that make any kind of sense?
Well, I think some of the players that are also being smart, and this is tough on Canada, they're taking Canada off. So they're creating that space off. And I do think we've seen some of the top players this year talk. It's been one of the biggest talking points. And finding a solution, I just feel like there's got to be a working group. There's got to be, the powers that be have to get together and study it. Look at the data, look at the injuries, look at how the game is played, and just come up with a better schedule. Let's see if it's done. But meanwhile,
but Pammy, you can have for the, like say after Wimbledon, you can have, the 250s, like people who are still looking to play. That's when you can have it. You don't have to wait till the end of the year, or they don't have to get squeezed out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So maybe you only need one Masters Series 1000 leading into U.S. So I guess you need, most people feel like they need 3 weeks on a hard court before the Open. Like you have to kind of build back from the majors. Look, we have in the last 15 years had a major move. That was Wimbledon. Okay. Moved 1 week later. The Australian Open, should it start later? That's another problem. Yeah. Should that, but they have school holidays they're trying to figure out. Anyway.
It'll never be fixed is what we're trying to say.
Never say never. Meanwhile, I want to start with a couple of things in this area of the game that has become my fascination, which is the mental side, the mindset piece. And I think one of the most extraordinary things happened this summer where a player loses in a major final love and love. It's about the most humiliating thing that can happen. And that's obviously Anisimova losing to Swiatek. And then in the very next major at the U.S. Open, a few weeks later, she turns the tables and beats Swiatek in a quarter. And I was happy to be calling that match courtside because that's where you can really look at the faces. And I just found the way she was able to turn that around and her whole career around. Mm-hmm. It's been a great story this year.
How'd she do it?
Well, I think she probably had to do a lot of work after that final to put it with her mental team, to put it in its right size, to realize all that she had accomplished, to win 6 matches, to play against Swiatek. Look what Swiatek did in the semis against Bencic. Yeah. Lost 2 games. I mean, it was one of the greatest performances ever, Swiatek, this year at Wimbledon. And then I think she right-sized it. And then she goes to her favorite service hard court. And then in that matchup, she got out onto the court. You could see the way she was carrying herself, that she thought she could win the match. You could tell in the first 2 games. Yep. You could hear at Wimbledon. I was listening on the radio. First 2 games of the Wimbledon final, miss it. No point was longer than like 3 or 4 hits. You knew Anisimova was in over her head.
Overwhelmed,
but you could tell in the first couple of games she was not over her head.
All right, so there's that example of somebody coming good after having a devastating loss. So now explain to me how Coco Gauff wins the French Open and then her game falls away. Why did that happen?
Well, unfortunately, I never won one singles major, much less a second singles major. I would have thought once you win the second one, you have validated everything and you can, throw your shoulders back, relax, and find a more comfortable place in playing pressurized moments. It was the exact opposite. And you could see it at Wimbledon, where she's never played well on grass. So I think going right to grass, a surface where she feels anxiety because it stays low, her forehand's a little more vulnerable, and her serve never got going at Wimbledon. But then what we saw up in Canada, it was, other than what happened to Sabalenka at the Australian circuit about 4 years ago, I hadn't seen a top player have such issues. There was I think 24 double faults in a match she won in Canada. And then to see the anxiety on her face at the Open, like in tears. I was in Donna Vekic's player box. I stepped off Donna's team, but they played second round. And I was like, oh my goodness, she's carrying so much anxiety. And I think it's about the forehand and the serve. So again, how does she get into a better mindset where she can deal with the anxiety that these shots, and you mentioned, Mary, earlier, we were talking before the voice note, how people are targeting it. So she knows.
Of course. And the thing is, for so many players, especially on the guys' side, but serve plus one, serve plus forehand, I mean, that's their bread and butter. And for Coco, it's the opposite of that. I don't know how. I mean, I guess it's a testimony to her mental strength that, she can control her stress level in spite of those 2 weaknesses, right? But it's very hard to watch her suffer like that. But you're saying it's not as much a technical issue, a mechanical issue, as a mental issue?
I think it's both. I think in this case, it's hand in hand. Well, I think a lot of people have probably tried to fix the technique. Think about Venus Williams, had some things wrong on her serve, never got it figured out, right? Never. So I think it's how to live with your deficiencies. And I think that is the mindset piece. Like, nobody is great at everything. And I feel like for Coco, she can deal with her forehand. I think she's able to kind of figure out, okay, bigger margins, bigger targets, more spin. I know I can't lean back on my back foot. I need to, I think she's starting to figure out how to live with that forehand. Okay. But I do think the serve, and especially when both are vulnerable, I think it's a little bit too much for her head.
Yeah. But you're right about Serena had the smoothest, sweetest, most lyrical serve I've ever seen on the women's side, But Venus's was always kind of discombobulated. And it's not like she ever really worked to recombobulate it. And I mean, if Coco can, is it recombobulate or combobulate? I'm not sure.
Either one, Mary.
Either one. I hope she figures that out, because she's here's what I've always felt about great players. They could have, a weaker volley than people around them, or a weaker forehand, or even a weaker serve. But, you've never seen a champion who's slow. And one of the things that Coco, she can leg out so many wins because she's such a great mover, offensively and defensively. So she's got that. But you can't always leg out your wins.
No. Her 2 biggest weapons are her movement and her backhand. But, all right, on to a men's tennis question.
Okay.
Obviously, it's the second year in a row of Sinner and Alcaraz. we finish the year and it doesn't appear that it's going to change in 2026. But so it's men's tennis. Is men's tennis like a little boring until the finals, or do you find it fascinating? And who do you think can step up?
Yeah, no, I'm not fascinated, except for those two. I mean, they are making each other better hourly, and that's kind of fun to watch. And in fact, it got to a point, and obviously the French Open is one of the all-time great watches, that final. But when you watch them, like, isn't there a part of you, Pam, that's thinking, how could men's tennis be played better than these two guys are playing it? Like, what is the next... Yeah, a lot of times, right? And I guess I do this more on the women's side than the men's, but you watch and think, oh, well, that could get better. Or some of these women are going to use the net more in the coming years or whatever. But when you watch Alcaraz and Sinner, who are both so complete and have such complete coaching teams, which is such a big part of that too. There are parts of me that wonder, like, what is the next step up? How do you make a bump from what these two guys are doing? Does that occur to you at all, or do you think tennis will always just continue to get better? How do you you watch them play and you think, how they play so quickly and so well. And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I think it's interesting when you look at what we've just come through the last 20 years and the progression of, say, Novak Djokovic's game, like how he continued to get better. Up until now, age is given him a ceiling. I think it's fun that Sinner and Alcaraz have shared with the media and with their fans things they're specifically working on in response to a loss.
Exactly.
Like Sinner after the Open, he wanted to work more on his variety, his slices, his drop shot, a lob, which he used when he beat him in the ATP Tour final. It's the little 1%, right?
Exactly.
And that's where my interest in the mindset piece, because I feel like these athletes can still get better mentally. Like they're not at their peak. These are still young guys.
Yes.
So I think it is fascinating. You brought up the net play, and you know me, that's where I lived. That's where I lived and died. And I do think the game, it's been fun, the evolution, as it's gone from really there were the big serving generation, and then there was a ton of baseline stuff. And now I feel like Sinner and Alcaraz are going to bring more and more all court, the transition game in, and I think it's going to be fun to watch. But, let's just quickly think about who might be able to challenge, like who has a high enough ceiling that if they put it together and they stay healthy, could it be, I'll bring up one name.
Okay.
Lefty Ben Shelton.
Okay.
Do you want to bring up a name?
No. I know. I mean, to be honest, I could see someone, squirting out a major maybe, but I don't feel like there's an upcoming number 3. And I would love to be wrong. I hope someone proves me dead wrong. But right now they're in a separate class.
Yeah, like Fonseca's too young. It's going to take him a couple years.
Yeah, and their injuries to be. That's why again that idea of a team, having a very solid group of grown-ups around you, is absolutely key. But I want to get back to your mindset. Who, to your mind, on the men's and women's side, has the most solid, canniest mind?
I think it's Jannik Sinner right now. I think what Sinner has been through on and off the court a lot, we didn't even know, dealing around the drug situation, that he inadvertently had a banned substance from one of his teammates put into his body during a massage. What he had to live through and while winning majors was quite unbelievable. This past year when he served that, 3-month suspension, and then what the rest of his year was. So I think the combination, and you've brought up a couple times, Mary, the continuity of the teams at the top with Sinner and Alcaraz, huge. And I hope the rest of the game kind of sees that.
Me too.
Like, get a team that is the best team you can and stick with it. Look, Sabalenka stuck with her team through thick and thin.
Okay, so let's go to the women's. Who has got the best mindset among the women?
Well, you've mentioned Coco Gauff, but I feel like that's the tale of two different mindsets within one player. I can see the mindset that helped her win her second major, and she was just too tough mentally for Sabalenka, who wasn't. Mm-hmm. But then over the summer, I'm like, oh my goodness, her mindset is like she's going to have a breakdown over the stress of the serve. So Coco's fascinating to me, how she bounces between the tough mindset and then the fragile mindset. I would say, actually, in a funny way, what Sabalenka's to me has proven a lot, and I will give all credit to Swiatek as well, like what she did at Wimbledon. But the women's game is so much fascinating because you could name Pegula, you could Rybakina, what she's done, and her team has seemingly settled in a little bit more after so much tumult. Mm-hmm. And we're not going to go into that whole story, but Rybakina is another one that, wow, she looks poised to have a great 2026. The women's game is the exact opposite of the men's game.
It's so true.
And isn't that what makes tennis, pro tennis, so special, is how they complement each other. No other sport does this.
Yeah, I think that's true. It goes in waves, doesn't it?
So as we kind of wrap things up, Mary, I just want to reflect on when I first met you in Columbus, Ohio, the second pro tournament I ever played in. It was the Avon Futures of Columbus, and you were one of 3 players to introduce yourself. We became friends right away. You didn't have a long career, but you then stepped seamlessly into broadcasting, and you were a role model and example to me and many others. And just in the last month, you have been honored by finding out you've been elected into the International Tennis Hall of Fame. Before we send it back to Catherine, David, and Matt, tell us what that first few weeks has been like.
Surreal comes to mind, Pam. I think I'm, and I know that you, among a lot of other people, pushed to get me on that in that nomination.
Did not have to push hard,
yes,
Mary.
You. I think you may have more than you're willing to admit, but no, it's. I never saw that one coming. Let's put it that way. And that I'm going in with Roger Federer is just. This is going to be I expect the pod people and you to be among those who are in gorgeous Newport, Rhode Island. Next summer, I think it'll be very special. Like, obviously, because of Roger, I will enjoy that part. I mean, he's the most beautiful player, one of the most beautiful human beings I've ever seen, I've ever known. I think he will. I just think he'll be very emotional, don't you?
Yes.
I think he'll be very. And the guy's won everything, but. There are so many people who come to Newport, so many great champions who come to pay their respects, and who they'll be. I'm very glad I'll be in Rhode Island at the end of next summer. I think it's going to be something special. I've heard from so many people, and that's been really nice. And not just the women, Kim Clijsters gave me a great phone call. And Billie Jean, obviously, Martina, Chrissy, but also like Jim Courier, Andy Roddick, Paul Annacone. I mean, I called their careers. I've been around a long time, almost 50 years. So I got to watch them, and I've worked with so many of them since. They become dear friends. But none dearer than you, my friend. I'm very glad I got to spend time with you here. And please move to Naples, Florida.
Well, Mary, you also introduced me to first Catherine Whitaker at the start of COVID when they were working on the Relived, and they've become such dear friends. So it's amazing, these friendships within the sport. And this has been fun.
It has.
Wrapping up 2025, looking ahead to 2026, especially late weekend in August, when Mary Carillo and Roger Federer will be inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame.
We will be there. Matt and I love nothing more than a US road trip. So this is given us an opportunity for another one, an incredible opportunity. I could not be more excited about going to Newport, Rhode Island to see Mary Carillo be inducted. I know everyone's very excited about Roger Federer, and that's, that's cool, whatever. But we're there for Mary, and it's going to be amazing. And just the thought of Pam having played such a role in getting Mary on the ballot like that makes my heart feel very full indeed. Quite a lot to reflect on there. All of it just fascinating stuff. Anything you'd like to pick up on in particular, Matt, from that tour de force of a voice note?
Well, just for starters, the thought of just Monica Seles just popping over and hanging out with Mary and Pam, that was exceptional. So many little pearls of wisdom in there, I thought, in terms of their expressions. You can't always leg out your wins. I think that's gonna stick with me. Pam talking about Amanda Anisimova right-sizing the Wimbledon final, I thought was really interesting. That felt so huge in the moment, and like, how on earth can a player recover from that? I still think it's one of the most extraordinary moments of the season, that press conference after beating Iga Swiatek, when Amanda Anisimova said that she'd watched the Wimbledon final back the night before to sort of see what she did wrong, and having initially sort of joked about the Wimbledon final, then having kind of ignored it, she then confronted it the day before she had to play Swiatek. So I thought that was really, really a moment this season. I'm kind of glad that Pam and Mary picked that out as well. And then, on the Sinner and Alcaraz of it, I also have that feeling of, how does tennis get better than this when you're watching it? And yet I do think the answer is that they're going to push each other to get better. Like the way Alcaraz has shortened some of his swings this year, I think is perhaps partly in response to the way Sinner used to be able to rush him. Alcaraz doesn't look so rushed quite so much in that matchup as he once did. Sinner has sprinkled in the variety as a direct result to Alcaraz. Would Alcaraz have made the improvements on his serve that he's made were it not for Sinner? They are just constantly pushing each other, and that is what I find so fascinating about their rivalry. So yeah, like, so rich to hear Mary and Pam just chewing the fat on tennis, and very, very special that we got to eavesdrop on that, and I hope all the listeners enjoyed it as much as we did.
Yeah, I have the same feeling when I'm watching Sinner and Alcaraz. I was glad they picked that out. It reminds me of watching figure skating, and in particular men's figure skating, although it applies to women's as well. But when you're, 20 years ago, it was watching somebody perform a single quadruple jump that had felt impossible 10 years before, and felt like the absolute pinnacle, beyond a pinnacle of what felt possible within the sport. And then suddenly people are performing multiple quads on all different jumps. It's like, okay, this is incredible, but obviously a quadruple axel isn't a possibility. An axel has an extra half turn on it to all the other jumps. Now suddenly we've got an American phenom performing quadruple axels regularly in combination, from a spread eagle entry. And it just makes you think there has to be a ceiling. There has to be a physical, biological ceiling to what human beings can do. And yet we thought we'd hit the ceiling 20 years ago, and here we are pushing it up and up and up. So maybe there's not. Maybe that's evolution. I don't know. Maybe Jannik Sinner and Carlos Alcaraz are sort of changing the parameters of what human beings are capable of before our very eyes. I don't know. But what I fall down on is, thank God there's two of them. And then with that comes the anxiety about one of them getting injured. I carry a lot of anxiety about that. I know that's pointless anxiety because there's nothing I can do about it. It's inevitable that one of them's going to get injured, but I really worry about what men's tennis looks like when that happens. And I actually think, look, if it's Alcaraz that gets injured, I think tennis has the potential to get a little bit boring. Obviously, Jannik Sinner fans would contest that, but just from an objective point of view, Jannik Sinner just metronomically winning everything, I think has the potential to be quite boring. I mean, anyone metronomically winning anything, I find generally quite boring. I think if it's Sinner that gets injured, I think Alcaraz could really drop off. I think he emotionally and mentally would really struggle without Jannik Sinner in a way that wouldn't happen the other way around. I know he did just fine during Sinner's 3-month absence earlier this year.
Not amazing, though.
Not amazing. And he talked about Sinner a lot. He lost to David Goffin, and he talked about Jannik Sinner a lot in that time. And you could see the twinkle come back into his eye when Jannik Sinner returned to the tour. So, like, I'm sort of constantly preparing myself for this eventuality because it feels inevitable. And I think as much as, you know, I want to live in the moment and in the present and enjoy what we have now, it does. The more I enjoy it, the worse it's going to be when it's hopefully temporarily taken away. But, you know, that's tennis, isn't it? It feels like this sort of precarious joy.
Yeah. And look, I share a lot of that anxiety as well. I kind of want David to come in here and tell us it's all going to be okay in a second, but just something that I've been thinking about, kind of related to that, and hopefully is a positive, and also related to what Mary was saying there. I do think the general, like, stability that Alcaraz and Sinner have does make them slightly less prone to getting those injuries. You know, like they're not having to chase. They're kind of obviously in competition with each other, but they can manage their schedules in a way that I think a lot of other players on tour can't quite so much, because when they do play, they're so good, they're reaching the latter stages, and they've got these amazing teams in place that know their bodies, know the way they work, all that kind of thing. Obviously, they're susceptible to rolling an ankle or a kind of freak injury, and I live with that anxiety. But in terms of like just an injury that might come with overplaying or overtraining or training in the wrong way, I think they've got such an advantage there on the rest of the field because of how good they are, because of everything they've built up over the last few years. And I could be wrong, but it doesn't feel like an injury is going to come from that. You know, like there's such a security and a knowledge to their teams as well, as Mary's described. And I think the big three, the big four had that as well. Obviously, they all picked up little injuries over the course of their careers, but there was such stability to them and their teams, and I think that really did help their longevity in a way.
Okay. Yeah, I will take that positivity, Matt. David, tell us it's all going to be okay.
It's all going to be okay, guys.
You worry about Alcaraz flinging himself around the court, though. I know.
Oh, yeah. I do think he chases too many balls. It was Federer who first pointed it out in the first Laver Cup that Alcaraz played, where he just said maybe he doesn't need to chase every ball like that.
Certainly not in an exhibition.
No, he sort of said it in a kind of amused way, an affectionate way, but also there's a serious point there is, come on. I mean, I know we might gasp at some of these gets, but you lost the point anyway. You might win the odd one or two, but maybe save those for when you're break point up or break point down or something. Maybe I'm being a killjoy. But that's the one thing that goes through my mind. The fact that they've put together the coaching teams they have tells me that everything is just designed to be at the top and to be competing against one another, to be getting these tiny, fine margins. The fact that they don't have to play all the events because they've realised that for their legacies now, the majors are what count, and the record against each other and the ranking and that sort of thing just makes it less likely that they're going to not come to the party at the majors because everything's geared towards them. I also think that things can change maybe over period of time, but it can feel like not very much time. I mean, if you go back 6-8 months ago, Jack Draper looked right there, and I was banging on about Artifice, and these guys haven't played for 6 months, and things can change out of sight, really. But I do think that those two are going to be constant. It's going to be up to the others to see if anybody can come through. And I mean, I know Pam mentioned that Fonseca's too young, but wow, am I interested to see his next season, to see whether there's development that makes you go, he's figured something out here. And I'm hopeful there. I'm hopeful.
Is it because he's got a hard man haircut that you're always encouraging young tennis players to get?
Doesn't hurt for an off season to be going in with one of those.
Okay, well, while we're on the subject of Carlos Alcaraz and Jannik Sinner, let's hear from Charlie Eccleshare, who shocked us all with his choice of what stood out for him from 2025.
Hi everyone, it's Charlie Eccleshare here. Hope you're all doing well. This is really tricky, obviously, trying to distill the year into one theme, one moment, and there are inevitably so many to choose from. Madison Keys winning the Australian Open, and her news conference after, and how open she was about her struggles with her mental health, and how inspiring that was. And, on a similar theme, the horribly overused sporting cliche, but that kind of redemption story, seeing Amanda Anisimova beat Iga Swiatek, being there on Ash, just 2 months after that haunting and horrible double bagel Wimbledon final defeat. Amazing moments, and there were so many others. But if I think of the match and, the kind of singular moment that I know I'll always remember and will always say I was there for, and apologies because it's boring, but it is the French Open men's final, being sat on Chatrier for all 5.5 hours of it. And there are a couple of moments that really stick with me, or there are lots actually, but the moment where Alcaraz wins the match with that forehand pass down the line, but also just a bit earlier in the tiebreak, I think it moved him 4-love up, drop shot, draws Sinner in, then it's a forehand volley cross-court passing shot, and at that moment you kind of knew it was done. And you knew as well by that point that you were part of something pretty special, that this match had become the center of the sporting universe, and more than that, it transcended sport. It was one of those matches that everyone seemed to be watching. And yeah, it's kind of rare that, you have a day or a match or a moment or whatever that you'll remember for the rest of your life. But that was one of them. That is something I know I will be boring people in years to come by being like, no, I was at that match. Yeah, it was pretty good. But I will. And I make no apologies for that, because it instantly went into that pantheon of kind of Federer and Nadal, 2008 Wimbledon, or Borg-McEnroe, 1980. And it ties in, I guess, to a theme. If that's the moment, then the theme is kind of how much it matters. This is something we've been talking about throughout the year, or certainly the second half of the year, how much it matters that you have the scope for these incredibly high highs with Sinner and Alcaraz, but then the rest of the men's tour can be kind of boring and there's not loads else going on. That's sort of been a tension I've been wrestling with for the last few months, I guess. And maybe this exercise is quite helpful, with a bit of distance, thinking what is it? What's something I'm really going to take away? And that's it. And maybe at this point, that's kind of a sacrifice, in inverted commas, we have to make for those high highs, is that there are going to be some lulls. Obviously, we want to have our cake and eat it, or I certainly do. We want to have this amazing rivalry, but could we also have, a third person come in? Could we also have some maybe more interesting subplots that really matter? We've had some other great stories on the men's side, thinking like Vachereau winning a Masters out of absolutely nowhere, stories like that. But, really at the sharp end, that there's been one show in town. But it has been such an incredible show. So, yeah, maybe that's okay. I don't know. But I do know that that match they played will always stay with me. And I guess the men's side is brought into sharper focus because on the women's side, they're almost at that sweet spot, what I think is the sporting sweet spot, like the Big Four era, where you've got a lot of players who can reliably get to the latter stages of majors, but you don't know who's going to win. So there aren't too many contenders, but there aren't too few. So yeah, I think overall, that's quite an enviable position to be in. But for all, certainly those of us who are so close to the sport, we might occasionally grumble about the fact that these two players are too dominant and it's too predictable. But then, you do take a step back. You think, God, I was just so lucky to be there. And it's exciting to think that there may well be many more of those to come. Whether any of them quite hit those levels, we don't know. But I think it will be quite fun finding out. Thanks, everyone. See you soon. Bye.
It was interesting, wasn't it, when we had the Barge Award show last week for Friends of the Pod. The two obvious categories were ATP Match of the Year and WTA Match of the Year. And look, there was barely any point of doing that category on the men's side of things. Like, there was such an obvious winner. And the WTA category had so many great contenders. It almost feels a bit wrong to me that the ATP has the match of the year for 2025 because sort of the WTA has it in terms of match quality and match drama, but it is absolutely undeniable that Carlos Alcaraz against Jannik Sinner in the Roland Garros final was the match of 2025 and the best tennis match that I have ever seen live and may ever see live. I think it's very possible that I won't see a better tennis match than that. It's very also possible that I will see previous sort of ice skating analogy and the fact that these guys are still really young and seem to keep getting better. But it just was, David. It just was that good. Yeah.
The boring the grandkids about it that Charlie referenced, I can really relate to that. If I never commentate on another match, I had the privilege of commentating on sets 2 and 4 of that match. If I never commentate on another match again, I'll always have that memory of having been able to witness that inside the stadium, try to keep up with the shots, try to find the right words and the right reactions and know that I came off saying to the producer, I would pay you to have done that. And maybe that's not the best negotiating tactic of all time, but I don't care. That's how I felt.
Matt, you did not move for all 5 sets. Not even a loo break. I think about that all the time.
Yeah, me and Mohamed Layani during Isna Mahoo. Yeah, look, it was extraordinary. I've had a very lucky year, a great year in terms of attending live events and being at some moments, and that was the very best of them all. And it's funny what stays with you, right? Like now, what are we? 6 months on or so, I mostly remember how I felt. I mostly remember the frenzy inside the stadium and the noises everyone was making and the laughing that they were doing, and looking over at you, Catherine, and Charlie there. And I remember very closely that we were with Itamar, our friend, as well, watching this one. Like it's kind of just like it becomes a shared experience. And there are little moments from the match that stay with me. Charlie's picked out one there in the tie break. I always think of the Alcaraz sort of forehand squash shot that he hit very late down the stretch in the 5th set, which wasn't even the winner in the rally, but it got him back in the rally. It was just an extraordinary moment. It was so special. And I think Charlie's voice note there and your comments there, Catherine, about how many more great matches there were on the women's side this year, all completely agree with. I think there was that stat, wasn't there? We only had 2 matches in the men's majors actually go to 5 sets from the round of 16 onwards at slams this year. One of them was the greatest match of all time, potentially Sinner Alcaraz. The other one was, I believe, Cameron Norrie, Nicholas Jarry at Wimbledon. There was
just as memorable.
There was a dearth of really competitive matches down the stretch at the majors this year. But I do think we probably do need to just maybe look a bit harder for the intrigue in men's tennis going into 2026. That's going to be a goal for me, because I do think that there are a lot of stories over the year. I'm not saying necessarily in the middle of those slams. I think it can be a bit of a tough scene in the middle of those slams when it feels like a bit of an inevitable march towards Sinner Alcaraz and we're not getting super competitive matches. But there are a lot of other stories through the year that I think just do naturally feel less compelling because they're not Sinner Alcaraz, but they are still great in their own right. Just off the top of my head, the Musetti Nightmare Tour, Vachereau, the fact that Draper was so good at the start of the year, how hyped we all were for Fils. I think that was a real blow, losing Draper and Fils halfway through the season, as David's talked about. Those were 2 players we were really excited about. But there were good matches. We had Kaboli Bergs at the end of the season. They all feel a bit less significant than all of the great women's matches because there's more parity on the women's tour and everything feels significant. But it's a goal for me to try and really remember and get into the other stories in men's tennis beside Sinner Alcaraz in 2026, because there's not only 2 players playing great tennis on the men's tour. Other people are playing good tennis, and I do think it is partly up to us to appreciate that.
I agree with you. But look, I think we did get into all of those stories. I was living for the Musetti Nightmare Tour. It really gave me something to get my teeth into during a stage of the season that I struggle with. But I think the reason that, there's a lot of reasons why that was compelling, but it wasn't building up to a slam. It felt consequential because it didn't feel like the eventual outcome was inevitable. The problem at slams is that we know that fun stuff happens in the men's side of a slam in the first few rounds, and we get into that, but we get into it in a very isolated way because it all feels so inconsequential in terms of the eventual outcome. Yes, we can find and enjoy the stories, but that is a problem.
That's what I said. Yeah,
add weight and gravity to what you're watching if it feels like it really matters at the sharp end. But I agree with you, and I think it really was a blow losing Fils and Draper, particularly for David. Obviously, our thoughts are with you, David, at this difficult time.
Yeah, it's worse for me than for them. No, look, I'll be interested to see whether they can make a go of their careers at that level again. I mean, I know that sounds very dramatic, but there has to be a big question mark over players that have missed that long, who are putting that sort of strain on their bodies. I hope for the best. But yeah, I am. I totally see both of your points there, really, and I'm really determined to sort of look for a particular. There are so many human interest stories as well as developing tennis stories. I'm fascinated to see who jumps out of the blocks. When I think of how poorly Kaboli started the year and how incredibly he ended it, maybe he can start the year well, and wouldn't that be interesting to see where that took him? There's a lot of people like that, but you are still left with this feeling of, does this translate into something that could threaten those two if they came up against them? And I'd love to see somebody who did. Not that I don't love their rivalry, but it would be great to find somebody who's just able to impact them.
A third man, if you will. And that leads me to the iconic Simon Briggs of the Daily Telegraph. Here is one of our favourite people.
So movie buffs might be familiar with a great film called The Third Man, which was sort of in my head when I got to the spring of 2025, and I was looking at Jack Draper and thinking he could be the third man in the great ATP rivalry alongside Sinner and Alcaraz, in the same way that Novak Djokovic became a third wheel behind Federer and Nadal. Jack had just won Indian Wells. He reached the final of Madrid. The newspaper was getting very excited about him, and we were hoping for a big summer. We were hoping to introduce him to British sporting fans, not tennis fans specifically, because they know who he is, but the ones who hadn't quite yet worked out who this guy was because he hadn't won enough rounds at Wimbledon. It turned out that he wasn't going to win many rounds this year either, because he was already struggling with what was the beginnings of this really horrific bone bruise injury, which has killed his season pretty much stone dead. So that has probably been the dominant narrative for me in 2025, the excitement and then the concern. And we heard Jack give a great interview with the Tennis Podcast a few weeks ago. We heard what a great guy he is. We heard how difficult he finds it not to overpress as he tries to keep up in this super competitive world. And now we've discovered he can't play even the exhibition, even the Moratoglu exhibition at the end of the year. And we're just praying that he can make it to Australia in some shape or form. So that's my memory, perhaps. And we just have to wish him all the best for 2026.
And we do wish him all the best for 2026, for Jack's sake and for Simon Briggs' sake. The man needs something to write about, David.
Yes, that's right. Because Emma Raducanu can't play every day. No, listen, I mean, Simon loves covering different stories as much as anybody, but the hard facts are that the Grand Slam nations need somebody on each draw to follow, and Jack Draper is incredible news for British tennis, following on from Andy Murray, that he's come along and he's suddenly become this compelling player. And the first 6 months of last year, I mean, we're actually in excess of what I thought he was going to be capable of, and it looked sustainable. It seemed as though he'd become robust, and just a terrible shame for him that's changed. So let's hope it changes back as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I do worry, just to group him in with Artifice again, these sort of chronic sounding injuries at a young age, they really concern me. As the listener is starting to understand, I have a lot of second-hand injury-related anxiety for tennis players.
If we sort of maybe just sort of put a bow on the men's tennis chat here, right? Like where we're going in 2026, to my mind, there's kind of three like big picture options. And one of them is kind of, as Simon's talking about there, a third man coming along. And, you know, whether that's a Draper or a Fils or a Fonseca or a Shelton, you know, whoever it could be, maybe it's someone more like Fritz. Like, that's an option. The other option, I think, is like it all continues as it is, and Sinner and Alcaraz, which I think what they've done this year is kind of lifted and separated from the rest of the field. You know, as David was saying, things can change quickly. It wasn't that long ago that Alcaraz wasn't even in the top two. He started the year not in the top two, and they hadn't played a Grand Slam final against each other, and yet they now just seem so far ahead of the rest of the field. So that's, I think, probably the most likely option in my mind, that it continues, like no one is quite able to make that jump, and Sinner and Alcaraz remain pretty neck and neck. Is there also an option that one of those lifts and separates from the other? Like, is that possible in 2026? Does the scene look a bit different because it's not a third man coming along, it's one of them standing out above the others and clearly identifying themselves as the number one, the best player in the world? Like, I'd be interested to see that as well. I think that is possible. And obviously, I think probably all of our minds would go to it being Alcaraz. I think we all sort of lean on Alcaraz's talent so much and his potential and his upper level. We're all such believers in that. I don't want to speak for you both.
No, I think if you told me one's going to separate next year, I would go Sinner.
And why would you go Sinner?
I mean, obviously he's an incredible tennis player, but I think his mental strength. I mean, I think Alcaraz's mental strength is underrated, and I think he really proved something with winning the US Open this year in particular. Like, he just locked in and said, "This one's mine," and proved that he can really be tunnel visioned, I think, in that way. But I think that comes a lot more naturally to Jannik Sinner than it does to Carlos Alcaraz. I think he can do that 365 days a year. I think dominance will suit Jannik Sinner better than Carlos Alcaraz. When there's so little to choose between them tennis-wise, that's an outfit I can see him wearing.
Yeah,
David?
That makes sense.
Well, I would probably say that he's more likely to be consistent as well. Unless injury comes along, I just don't see that scenario happening. I think it is possible. I think somebody would have to get a lot worse. Somebody would have to go through a bit of a crisis of form. I don't think Alcaraz is going to just be able to produce French Open comeback level or US Open level and elevate himself above what we're seeing from Jannik Sinner. Not through 4 slams a year. As much as I might have said 12 in a row guy, I didn't expect Sinner to come along like this. From where we were at that Wimbledon. He has proved himself over the last 2 years. He is baseline level, bloody impressive. And Alcaraz occasionally has otherworldly levels that can go above that. But I think it would be more likely that Sinner would dominate and Alcaraz might have a year where he struggles. But I still don't think either of those are going to happen. I think they're going to be neck and neck and they're going to be sharing these things out.
And I think the Australian Open is so fascinating there, right? Because Alcaraz has said it's his biggest goal for 2026. Coming right out, the first tournament he plays is his big goal to complete the career slam, be the youngest man to do that. And if he does get that, you are starting to look at a picture of a bit of Alcaraz dominance, right? He would have won 3 of the last 4 majors. He would have won the 2 hardcourt majors most recently off Sinner. He would have 3 more majors in their personal race. Like, I think the Australian Open is like, this is not a shocking take, is just so fascinating. It's so perfectly poised with the way Sinner sort of came back at Alcaraz at the end of last year on the indoor hard courts as well, and just looked every bit as good as Alcaraz did. Like, it's so well set up. And yeah, I suppose I just think if someone's going to do something totally outrageous, to me, I go Carlos Alcaraz. But I do get what you mean about Sinner's consistency and reliability and how dominance would kind of suit him. But ultimately, I come down on the same side as you. I think most likely scenario is they continue to split the majors over the next
I think they
years.
split the first 2. I think Alcaraz wins Australia, Sinner wins the French.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, it's so perfectly set up for Australia with Alcaraz's quest to become the youngest man to complete the career slam. But then imagine Alcaraz does that and how perfectly that sets up the French Open, because then it's, okay, I've done it. He's done it. Can you do it now? How motivated Jannik. I mean, he doesn't need extra motivation, does he? But, delicious. Absolutely delicious. And then there's always the possibility that, in the words of Mary Carillo, somebody else might squirt one out. You just never know. Shall we hear from Hannah Wilks?
Always.
Yes. Let's hear from the brilliant captain of the barge, somebody that we can't believe we get to work with. And she writes a column for us every month for friends of the podcast. She's an incredible talent, is Hannah. And here she is reflecting on 2025.
Looking back at 2025, what I see is a season when the gulf between the content and the process of the tennis year became truly so polarized, perhaps to an unprecedented extent. And what I mean by that is that genuinely, I think the tennis this year was so good in terms of what actually went on the court. There were a lot of really memorable matches and storylines and journeys and rivalries and tournament runs. You know, whether it was the French Open men's final, maybe the greatest men's match I've ever seen, or Madison Keys at the Australian Open with just a story for the ages, and Arina Sabalenka versus the universe and also sometimes herself. There was just so much to get your teeth into and really enjoy. Like, even the rest of men's tennis outside Alcaraz and Sinner, often a bit of a howling wasteland in 2025, even that finished pretty strongly with the Davis Cup finals. You know, at the big events, at the small events, at the team events, at the weird events. Like, it's just been so much to enjoy on the court. But I think there's also been so much getting in the way of even watching what's going on in the court. The bad ideas are getting so difficult to ignore, for one thing. I mean, shout out 2-week 1000s, Saudi Arabia. And the commitment to institutional self-sabotage is so blatant. And then there's what I think is the biggest issue tennis is facing now, which is maybe the least discussed, which is climate change. I understand people don't want to talk about it because they don't know what to do about it. But look at Cincinnati this summer, like look at Shanghai. Even if all you want to do is watch tennis and not think about the fate of the world, which I find extremely relatable, there is an existential threat to tennis from the climate crisis. And I don't really see the sport engaging with it. I realise that is a bit of a downer to end on. So I won't end on that because, look, you can basically ignore everything I said in the last couple of minutes. I mean, yes, Madison Keys' redemption arc. Yes, Alcaraz in a championship points, greatest match of all time. Yeah. But we all know that the real moment with a capital M of the 2025 tennis season was the forehand winner Takita Oda has hit to save the second championship point against Gustavo Fernandez in the US Open men's singles final before going on to complete the career Grand Slam. And please imagine me punctuating that statement like Novak Djokovic hanging up the phone on Ben Shelton because I said what I said. Thank you and good night.
She said what she said. I loved that.
Yeah, superb. And it inspired me to go and seek out highlights of that Takito Oda Gustavo Fernandez final, and there's about 3.5 minutes on the US Open website, which we'll link to in our show notes. Just watch it. You don't even need any more. It's one of those rare short form highlights where you just feel that you've got the experience of that match and the winners and what it meant to both players. Both players were seeking to complete the career Grand Slam in that match. Fernandez has obviously been around a lot longer. He's not the prodigious talent that Takito Oda is, and yet he was the guy who had the match points first, more of them, didn't take them, and yet he's still there to congratulate his opponent with a really warm response. And actually, you know, Matt talks about wanting to sort of seek out the good stories a bit more in men's tennis. I kind of want to seek out the good stories around a Grand Slam, and that includes the wheelchair tournaments, it includes doubles, maybe even junior tournaments, you know, and just try to just find more things that are out there because there's so much. And Tsukito Oda is becoming one of the stories of the sport now. So young, so dominant. And watching Alfie Hewitt try. We were with him at the history conference at Wimbledon the other day, where he's talking about how he and Gordon Reid want to try to start winning Grand Slams by attacking the net more. And in these 3 minutes highlights, Tsukito Oda is just flying in towards the net, and it's extraordinary what he's doing. So yeah, there's so much to enjoy, and yet you have the crises that Hannah alludes to as well, which you almost try to ignore because you can't figure out a solution because, well, what is the solution?
Yeah, and we're guilty of that too. Like, we try and at least not ignore it, but so often what we're doing is just sort of mentioning it, nodding to it, sort of making the listeners know that we're aware of this is on our minds, and then just moving on, because what else can you say? Just very quickly on wheelchair tennis and Tsukito Oda, I feel exactly the same. I also think women's wheelchair tennis for next year is set up in a very intriguing place, because this year the story of 2025 in women's wheelchair tennis was Yui Kamiji, who nobody saw coming. I think everybody thought her best days were behind her, and she's won multiple slams this year. It's been a really heartwarming story, but she's done it in the absence of Dida de Groot, who has been on the sidelines, injured. She's had a major surgery, and she's coming back at the start of next year. Will she be the same player that she was? I don't know. But Kamiji going head to head with Dida de Groot is a fascinating storyline for 2025. But yeah, back to climate change, Matt. And tennis's bad decisions. They are impossible to ignore, aren't they? It's we used to have a category when we did our end of year show differently. One of the categories used to be the tennis shooting itself in the foot award, and there were always so many contenders. It just, I don't know, it feels like the contenders are getting less funny. Like, it feels like the bad decisions are less silly or amusing and more sort of dark and potentially existentially catastrophic. Maybe that's just reflective of a shift in the world.
Just the way the world's going. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I did love Hannah's turn of phrase, commitment to institutional self-sabotage, which is something I've always felt when I've been at the Davis Cup finals and the Billie Jean King Cup finals. Like that feeling of what I'm watching is great. Like, this tennis is really good. The players are amazing. Like, this is top level stuff. Like, and yet that nagging feeling of, oh, it's happening at the end of the season when everyone's exhausted, or people can't watch this because it hasn't got a TV rights deal, or, oh, I wish that player were here, but they can't be because of the way the season's set up. Like, there's always like a but. And I think that's part of what makes the slams so sort of vivid for us. Like, there are some buts at the slams. Like, we get very frustrated by the scheduling at the slams, particularly the French Open night sessions, particularly at some of the slams putting all the women on first. Like, we do have those feelings, but generally the slams are so like secure, and they've got so much history behind them, and you know what you're going to get out of them. Like, you are able to concentrate a little bit more and just live in the tennis of it all, I think. But through the season, the 2-week Masters, the issues that Hannah's talked about in terms of playing in places where it's just too hot or sticky to be playing tennis, or taking the tour to places where there might not be that much support for the players, or places that might, have horrific human rights records. Like, these come into play constantly. You're constantly thinking about that as well as the tennis. And yeah, it's a shame, because I agree with Hannah. Like, the tennis this year has been exceptional for so much of it. So many good matches I can look back on and think about, especially as we said at the start on the WTA Tour, and yet so little of it comes without that but and without that and of institutional self-sabotage. And the tough thing is, don't really see that changing, and that's a shame.
Okay, well, for some more optimism, let's hear from our final voice note contributor, someone who's become a bit of an icon around these parts for his voice notes. They have been described by me as Carillo-esque, and they've been a really wonderful addition to our review shows over the last year or so. So let's hear now from The Athletic's Matt Futterman.
I'm not breaking any news here when I say that tennis is a long season. I feel like it gets longer every year. And I should say I've had zero trouble filling my time since the tours ended business in mid-November. That's about a month after I think they should close up shop. As usual this year, I found the exhaustion and general disinterest in what happened after the U.S. Open pretty overwhelming among the big players. Even with $15 million on the line in Riyadh, there were a lot of shrugs following losses. All that said, here's how I think the length of the season and the grind of it all revealed itself to me during the past 12 months. Over and over, my brain kept going back to how different players were at the start of the season than they were at the end. I suppose that can be a good thing. Players who have crap starts of the year in Australia and the Middle East still have plenty of time to salvage matters over the next 8 months. Seriously, that is more than 2 months longer than an NFL season, from the first kick to the last second of the Super Bowl. Worked out very well for Taylor Fritz, didn't it? Remember his loss to Gael Monfils in Melbourne? Hard to imagine, right? Now for the downside. I found the arc of it all kind of discombobulating. Let's think about some names. What was 2025 like for Madison Keys? January was undoubtedly the greatest month of her career. She won that elusive Grand Slam. She stayed hot for a while and put up some good results into the early part of the summer. By the U.S. Open, she was spent and kind of miserable once more, especially after a first-round loss. We barely saw her until the tour finals, where she was sick and made a quick exit. There was the saga of Jannik Sinner. He missed 3 months serving that doping suspension after the Australian Open. Then he came back and experienced an opera of ups and downs. Heartbreak in Paris, the best of the best at Wimbledon, seemingly lost in the wilderness in New York, triumph in Turin. That's a wild journey. Novak, the muscle injury in Australia, the messed up hip by the end of Wimbledon, all those Grand Slam semis, the titles in Geneva and Athens. I'm not exactly sure what I am supposed to remember here. Ben Shelton, he dazzled me for the better part of 6 months on the big stages. Then he blew out his shoulder in September and was a shadow of himself down the stretch. Jack Draper endured a similar narrative. I have no idea what we're going to see from either of them. I think Coco Gauff spent 6 months playing herself into Grand Slam winning form and looked like one of the best players in the world again. That joyous collapse on the clay of Roland Garros will forever be etched in my mind. By late August, she was a broken player. What the hell? Anisimova? She couldn't get out of the second round in Australia. She won Doha. She was basically broken for the next 2 months. And then she became one of the tour's top bankers. Victoria Mboko, at 19, played 76 matches this year. She started the year outside the top 300. Now she's number 18. Is anyone shocked about how her teenage body broke down after Canada? Mira Andreeva was about the best player in the world in March. By October, she couldn't get through a point without crying. Anyone else find this deeply weird? Iga Swiatek, Arina Sabalenka? Well, Arina was about as consistent as it gets, I suppose. Oh, there was a breakdown or two there. Remember Paris? A tennis season is a hell of a journey, isn't it? Another one is just about 2 weeks away. Off we go. Happy holidays, everybody.
Off we go, indeed. I do love a Matt Futterman voice note, David, and he speaks a lot of very profound sense there in terms of a big picture view of this juggernaut that is the ATP and WTA tours.
Yeah, the endlessness of it all. I'm mindful that Matt Futterman and ourselves and all the people you're hearing from here, we're all the privileged few who get to travel to the Grand Slams, who get to walk in to tournaments with a badge, who get to make a living out of this sport. I mean, what an absolute treat, and I never take that for granted. I absolutely love talking to you two about tennis and hearing from all of them and doing it for the people that are listening, and I hope that that's enjoyed by you all. But at the same time, I don't think that should leave the sport free from critical analysis and criticism generally, when you feel that it just could do with being so much more scarce. And that's something that Jack Draper alluded to in the interview we did with him. And Matt's right. I mean, we haven't had tennis for a couple of weeks. And yes, I sometimes find myself thinking, I miss not being able to put the tennis on while I'm doing things and that sort of thing. But that's okay. I got used to it after a couple of days and I did other things. And the thing is, by the time it comes around, I'll be bursting for it. And that could be so much more of a feeling. I'm big into NFL these days. The regular season is 18 games and then a few playoff games, and it lasts between September and the end of January. And then you have 8 months without it. I'm not saying I want that for tennis, but it really struck me more than ever this year. And look, I ended up putting it at Roger Federer's door and the Laver Cup's door for not helping the calendar and so forth. And I got ahead of myself there, because it's not their fault, but it's everyone's fault. The sport should just stop after the US Open as a singles concern, or at least at the end of September. Have the tour finals at the end of September. Have October as your team month to put the Billie Jean King Cup and the Davis Cup in, and then stop completely for 2 months. That makes the Davis Cup and the Billie Jean King Cup way more important and better for a whole month. You could make it what you want it to be and what it needs to be. You could still have the tour finals. Yes, you'd lose some tournaments, but imagine how much better the whole sport would be. And it's never going to happen. Sad, isn't it?
Mm. Yeah, and I think the thing is, we're not naive enough to think that, anybody's going to stop making capitalist decisions about the sport. People are going to be driven by profits and money and growth. But the thing is, it feels like, to me at the moment, everybody is driven by incredibly short-term profits, money, growth, grabs. Nobody is looking at the long term, and I include the financial long term in that. Building the product and making the product the best it can be will ultimately be the best thing for revenues long term. And it feels like everybody, I don't know if it's down to the fact that the people in the top jobs tend to only be in them for a few years. So you're judged on that very short snapshot. And it's, did you increase revenue in that time? Basically that's what they're going to be judged by. And I'm not suggesting you get rid of democracy in these roles. But it does feel like there is fundamentally something quite wrong with the structure of how these things are functioning, that everybody is very short-term motivated. That strikes me as a very big problem, because you'll quite often get clapbacks about, I think there are quotes from, I often cite Canada as an example of this, and a clapback we get is that the tournament directors of Canada are saying, well, we're quite happy because we've got more days and we've got increased ticket revenues because of those extra days, and we're happy with the extended Masters arrangement and what the ATP have done for us. Well, let's check back in 5 to 10 years, shall we, when that event is massively diminished. I mean, it already is, but when sponsors have noticed how massively diminished it is, and broadcasters have noticed, and yeah, I'm labouring the point, but that's how I see it. And I feel like this is just a rare example of where, if only they could see it, like everyone's interests are aligned here. You know, when I see the comments from Felix Auger-Aliassime and Emma Raducanu about, you know, we're multimillionaires that get to travel the world and play sport for a living, like, let's shut up and nobody wants to hear us complaining. Okay, sure. And like being aware of that privilege is a good thing. But I don't want to see you playing tired and demotivated. Like, that's not in your interest and it's not in my interest. I would rather have less of watching you play tennis. And when I do watch you play tennis, to know that you are giving it everything and able to physically give it everything and feel like you can put your body on the line and you're not worried about next week. You're not worried about burnout. You're not worried about falling out of love with the sport. Like, our interests are aligned on this, and I'm okay with you complaining about it, because I'm complaining about it too. But I don't know. Yeah, it's not going to change.
And I think that you know, I completely agree. By the way, in terms of, you know, I would love a 2-month off season. I think that would be a real boon for the sport to have that. But that thing that Matt Futterman's describing about the sort of ups and downs of a year, typically I don't see that as a negative. You know, I actually think that's one of the things I'm really drawn to about tennis. The, you know, the ebbs and flows of a season, the way someone can burst into form and then sort of disappear, and then you don't really know what's going to happen. And, you know, your outliers are your Sinner, your Alcaraz, your Sabalenka, the ones at the very top who manage to sustain it through the season. That's how you sort of identify their greatness, is their ability to kind of sustain that. You know, there's that passage, isn't there, in Open, Andre Agassi's book, about how tennis uses the language of life and how it sort of mimics life in a way. And, you know, a year is like that for people. You're going to have ups and downs. You're going to have months that are better than others. And I think tennis has got a good thing there in terms of that ebb and flow. But where I do agree with Matt, and I think it links in with Hannah's voice note, is that this year it felt like people were having their ebbs and flows as a result of the way the tennis season is set up. You know, it didn't necessarily just feel like people were drifting in and out of form. It felt like there was genuine, like, burnout and injury and, yeah, to go back to Hannah's words, institutional self-sabotage. And that was kind of depressing. Like, I don't mind generally the ins and outs and the ups and downs. I find that fascinating. But when it feels like it's kind of being forced upon these players because of what they're being asked to do, because of the way the tours and tennis is set up right now, it feels like we've got a problem. And I feel like we really reached that point this year where, you know, you felt like, gosh, this sport's brilliant, but got a problem. And yeah, will it change? Can it change? Will it change? No. Can it change? Yes. But
see you in a year for this
kind of
same conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Are we going to end up having to call this podcast institutional self-sabotage? Or
wouldn't be
squirt out a major? Just before we wrap up, I feel like we should end on a high note. Could we just talk about Amanda Anisimova for a moment? I know she was covered by... There was lots that was covered by Pam and Mary in their opening voice note that we didn't specifically touch upon. But I've taken so much from her arc in 2025. Like, if there's one moment, obviously match, it's going to be Sinner Alcaraz, and there have been lots of moments this year. We're incredibly lucky to get to do what we do. And there have been so many moments that will stay with me forever. Mostly David mistaking Matteo Berrettini, the Pope for Matteo Berrettini. That sort of subsumed all the other moments from 2025 for the time being. But Amanda Anisimova explaining that revealing that she had watched her Wimbledon final humiliation the night before taking on Iga Swiatek again in the US Open quarterfinal. That really lives with me. I come back and think about that all the time. How, I think inspiring is, that sort of language is used a lot, I think, and sometimes I glaze over a little bit. But I really was inspired by Amanda Anisimova this year and confronting just the ultimate tennis trauma. I know she's confronted bigger trauma than that in her personal life, and maybe that perspective is what helped her at the very least confront the tennis trauma. But the biggest trauma that you can experience in tennis, in sort of results terms, happened to her on the biggest stage, and the way she confronted that and didn't allow it to define her, or even did allow it to define her, but in the most positive possible way, I think is quite overwhelming, really. And I think of her in a completely different way to how I did 12 months ago. And she is the player I'm most excited about in 2026. Sorry to sort of wee on your turf, Matt,
No, just come on in, use the toilet.
Thank you, great. I did have to leave during the Roland Garros final to go to the loo. Sorry about that. I know this is, this is your patch, but I'm in on it. I've parked myself on your lawn and I'm not moving. I'm so into Amanda Anisimova.
You have nothing to apologise for. I'm glad we're all there.
And I'm now going to ask you both what you're most excited about in 2026. And unfortunately, I've already stolen the answer, Amanda Anisimova. But you can have her too, Matt. She was yours first.
Yeah, I mean, she's on the list for every year. But, even more so in 2026, I think big picture for the WTA, it's that group, isn't it? There are so many major contenders on the WTA tour, and I think if kind of to go back to the start of the show when we were talking about mid-seasons, and we identified as 2023 was a real Swiatek Sabalenka, kind of that rivalry really blossoming. I think at the end of 2024, I was excited about 2025 because by then a lot more names had kind of coalesced and become they felt like major champions, and it just feels like that's carried on again this year. If you told me next year that Amanda Anisimova wins a major, would not be shocked. Elena Rybakina would not be shocked. Coco Gauff would not be shocked. And yet you've still got Sabalenka and Swiatek there. That is a great group. I would love a Swiatek Sabalenka Grand Slam final in 2026. I still think those two are above the rest in terms of their consistency and what they've already done. And I do think it's time for us to get a Grand Slam final between them, the sort of two defining players of this generation, I suppose. But a year like this has shown that even without that, you can still have a stellar year in women's tennis. And that is exciting going forward. And so many of them are threats on different surfaces. The fact that Swiatek's now won Wimbledon, she's obviously a threat there. There's no real tournaments where you think, oh, that person's out of the picture. Gauff on grass, I think, still got kind of a way to go. But otherwise, everyone's a threat everywhere. And that is, to go back to Charlie's voice note, that is a sweet spot. And yeah, I love it. I can't wait. And obviously, what am I most looking forward to? Which city will I be going to a salon in? Is it Melbourne? Is it Paris? Is it New York? Is it London? It's going to be one of them. That's what I'm feeling.
Well, look, I would love Amanda Anisimova to win Wimbledon, obviously, but I hope it's an on-the-road salon experience, an exotic foreign salon. I think we
get a potential live at Wimbledon situation though. That could be fun.
Yeah, that's true. I think I'll do an Instagram live or something from the chat.
Either way,
the salon,
fun
wherever
will be had.
It is. Yeah. David, other than Matt going blonde in an exotic foreign hair salon, what are you most excited about in 2026?
Well, I mean, I concur with much of what you've said. I will continue to look forward to. I think there'll be more than one slam final between Sinner and Alcaraz. I know we joke about it, but I'm genuinely looking forward to seeing Stefani and Dabrowski playing doubles together, as my favourite doubles player, Stefani, and Matt Dabrowski. And I want to see them join up.
Conquer the world.
And I want to see them get to a Grand Slam final.
What if it doesn't work?
Well, I mean, I'm interested to know. It's a source of great fascination. And, there's loads of stories like that, really. I just want to keep as open a mind as possible. One of the things I loved about 2025 was that we started Tennis Podcast Meets, because we got to speak to and get to know just that little bit people that were names in drawers or we got preconceptions about, and then you get a little bit more sort of understanding of who they are as people just by being in their presence, and then you follow the results or follow how they're getting on, and I've really enjoyed that, and I want us to build on that. This is the great privilege of our access of being on site. There are so many, it's hard work sometimes, long days, long nights, long trip, away from family and whatnot, but the great privilege and advantage of being there is you just get to see and hear and feel things that you wouldn't if you weren't, and I hope that comes across in our coverage, and that's what we strive to bring you.
Yeah, can't beat being there. Get me to Australia.
All right. Not long now.
You're flying with Matthew, which I'm so excited about. I am
flying with Matthew. Yes. Watch this space for content, or specifically watch our Instagram for content at the Tennis Podcast. Do give us a follow. I don't think I've ever been in an airport or flight situation with Matthew before.
I imagine it's chaotic.
Yeah.
He's a great companion, I reckon.
I'm excited and anxious in equal measure. I should say the only reason we're travelling together is because Matthew wants to get in on my additional baggage allowance. It's not because he thinks I'd be a great travel companion. Yeah. It's very like when we were supposed to have dinner with Matthew and he texted asking if he could use my washer dryer while we were dining.
And then 15 minutes before we were meant to be having dinner, he said, "Can we push it back 3 hours?"
Yeah, that was an ill-fated evening, wasn't it? This has been so fun. I love these shows. I love our Grand Slam review shows. Thank you to all of our contributors, Pam, Mary, Charlie and Matt from The Athletic, the incredible Hannah Wilks, and the incomparable Simon Briggs. You are all very important members of the Tennis Podcast family, and we love you all. And we can't wait to voyage into 2026 together. We still have a couple of pods left in 2025, actually. In fact, more than a couple if you're a friend of the pod, because we have our live Q&A show tomorrow, Tuesday night, for friends of the pod. That's at 8 p.m. on YouTube. It'll be up as a podcast as well. We also have our final edition of Tennis Relived for 2025. That'll be up on Friday, and it focuses on Brad Parks, the man who came up with the idea of wheelchair tennis. It was all down to him 50 years ago. Next year, wheelchair tennis will be celebrating its 50th anniversary. And we'll be talking about that journey over the past 50 years and celebrating Brad Parks, who David has spoken to in great length. And he's He's a heck of a guy, so we're very excited about that show. Then we also have a weekly show recording on Sunday covering any and all news that the tennis world has chosen to bring us in that time. And then we'll be back the following Sunday to talk about your friend of mine, the Battle of the Sexes, and other news in the tennis world. But unavoidably, we will also talk about the Battle of the Sexes.
And that'll be our big 2026 season preview as well.
It will. Yes.
I'm focusing on that bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Matt. That has lessened the dread, the knot in my stomach slightly. So lots to come your way for the remainder of 2025. Even more to come your way in 2026. We've been planning. We've been drawing up lists of requests for Tennis Podcast meets. Fun and exciting stuff coming your way for 2026. Hello to our mascots, Phoebe, Maisie and Roger. We love you. Phoebe had a little cameo at the quiz last night.
Hey.
That was a good moment. Quite a lot of dog and cat cameos at the quiz, actually. I enjoyed all of that, but obviously in particular Phoebe's cameo. Hello to our top folks and executive producers, Greg, Chris and Jeff. We had Chris at the quiz last night. I think he performed very creditably, whilst also keeping an eye on the NFL at the same time. So well done, Chris. Matt, let's have some shout-outs.
We have Benji Husband from Melbourne.
How apt. Benji. Love the name Benji.
Right, Benji.
How fun.
And get this, Benji will be a ball kid at this year's Australian Open. And his favourite player is Grigor Dimitrov, and he's hoping for one more good run at a slam.
He only needs one, Benji. You never know.
You never know. 2 sets up he was on the great Jannik Sinner.
Well done, David, because that moment probably deserved a mention, didn't it, in the review show?
Yeah.
The great sliding doors of 2025. Benji, thank you for making us remember that. And good luck being a ball kid at the Australian Open. Not that you need it, but that sounds like it'll be great fun. Enjoy.
We've also got Geraint from Southwark in London.
Hello, Geraint.
All right, Geraint.
Geraint
from
says,
Southwark, as in Southwark, London?
Yes.
Oh, nearby. I wonder if he means sort of the place or the borough. Anyway,
who can say? In answer to... Stop going on about Southwark.
It's all I've got on Geraint at the moment. Tell us more, Matt.
I've been trying and you keep going on about Southwark. Geraint says, like Geraint Richards, an influential wheelchair tennis figure.
Good work, Geraint.
Good work, Geraint. We love that. I'm afraid to say anything more, but thank you for being a friend of the pod.
And finally, we have Peter Swenson from Corvallis, Oregon.
Oh.
Hi,
Hello, Peter.
Peter, who says, my early days of seeing professional tennis live were right in the David sweet spot of the early 90s when I saw players like Gabriela Sabatini and Stefan Edberg at the US Open.
Oh, fantastic. So you're thinking 1990 when Sabatini won the US Open and 91 when Edberg won the first of his 2 back-to-back US Opens. Oh, great days.
Thank you, Peter.
You've transported David, Peter. What a gift.
We'll put you in touch with David so you can just...
Do you want to go for a pint, Peter?
chat the 90s together. Geraint, Peter, and who was our first shout-out, Matt? Benji. Benji, Geraint and Peter, thank you ever so much for being friends of the pod. Thank you all for listening or for watching. If you joined us on YouTube, we will be back for Friends on Tuesday and on Friday, and we'll be back for everybody else on Sunday. If you'd like to become a friend of the pod, the link is in our show notes. Thank you. We'll speak to you soon.